Lord of the Mysteries. Chapter 1349. Door. After Bernadette received no response, she held the magic wishing lamp and walked to the window in the captain's cabin to take in the deep blue sea. She wasn't impatient, nor did she attempt to use her powers of prophecy, patiently waiting for any further developments. After a few minutes, a grayish-white fog suddenly appeared in front of her eyes. Right on the heels of that, the fog was dyed golden, as though it was coated with a layer of sticky syrup. Bernadette immediately bowed her head and looked at the magic wishing lamp in her hand. She saw that the wick at the mouth of the lamp had automatically ignited itself. Above the gray fog, in the ancient palace, beside the fool's chair, the prayer light, which was the size of a human head, was instantly occupied by a distorted, blurry golden figure. The figure's gaze penetrated the prayer light and penetrated the grayish-white fog, looking at the maggot vortex that was attempting to destroy everything around it. His voice immediately reverberated within Sapphira Castle, dignified and grand. "You actually lost control?" The tone of Genie was clearly mocking. He didn't care whether the crazy worms of spirit could understand him. At this moment, a strange door of light formed from countless balls of light appeared above the chair of the fool that had already collapsed. It was faintly discernible and emitted a bright light, forming a complicated symbol in midair. This symbol originally existed behind the fool's chair, formed from the pupilless eye and the contorted lines. As the symbol took form, the strange light became fainter and eventually completely fused into this space. In the next second, Klein's voice came from the symbol representing the fool. "Genie, I want to make a deal with you." The blurry and distorted figure immediately laughed. "Haha, I said that you would eventually agree." After laughing for a few seconds, Genie calmed down and said, "I was just wondering how is it possible for the new owner of Sapphira Castle to so easily lose control. This was a preparation I made for the worst-case scenario." The voice in the symbol of the fool wasn't impatient at all. Genie laughed and said, "Aren't you afraid that I'll raise the price at the last minute?" Klein replied unhurriedly, "This is just one of my preparations, but for you, it might be the only chance for many years." Genie's light gold figure swayed as though it had been blown by a gust of wind as a grand voice sounded. "My condition is the same as before. As long as you can remove the seal and release me, I will take what belongs to me back to the cosmos. I will leave the rest to you and grant you 3 wishes. Of course, from the looks of it, you seem to need my advance payment." Klein's voice sounded again from the symbol of the fool. "The promise I'll give you is to send the magic wishing lamp into the cosmos before the end of 1368 in this epic age. As for how you get out of your predicament, that is your own problem. My request is even simpler, and I only need 2 wishes. This is the deal I'm talking about. Whether you agree with it is up to you." 1368 was the year when the oldest one's barrier disappeared. It was acknowledged by the world's prophets as the apocalypse. The blurry and distorted figure fell silent for a few seconds before saying, "If you don't remove the seal, the wishes I can grant will be very limited. Once it exceeds a certain level, it will be granted in an extremely twisted fashion." Inside the symbol of the fool that was cast with a brilliant light, Klein's calm voice sounded, "You can fulfill the 2 wishes I need now." Genie fell silent again and didn't speak for a long time. By him, inside the primitive forest, Verdu, who was burning up both internally and externally, didn't waste any time. According to the God of War's instructions, he modified the altar and engraved the correct symbols, magic labels, and strange patterns. He was originally worried that the 3 demigod monsters would suddenly wake up, but when the ritual was ready, the sacrificial items remained unconscious, unable to resist. After placing the squirming meat blob, the deformed star bird, and the white raven with the dark eye circle onto the right spot, Verdu looked at the only candle on the altar and lit it. Then, he took a few steps back and chanted solemnly in Jotun, "Great door of all doors! Guide of the endless cosmos! Key to all mysterious worlds! I pray for your response, praying for you to descend into this world." Before he could finish his sentence, 3 loud bangs sounded from the altar. The 3 demigod monsters that corresponded to Bizarro Sorcerer, secret sorcerer, and parasite seemed to be being held by an invisible hand. They only struggled slightly before exploding, turning into blobs of flesh and blood that shimmered with different colors. The flesh and blood seemed to have a life of its own. Under the guidance of some indescribable force, they gathered in the air, forming strange and filthy symbols. Countless symbols combined together, forming a huge door that was still squirming like flesh and blood, one that was more than 5 meters tall. The door stood on the altar. It was pitch black inside, and it was unknown where it went. Flames from the candle representing Mr. Door suddenly soared, illuminating the entire door of flesh and blood, illuminating the darkness within. In the darkness, there were tiny balls of stellar light condensing into spherical lights. On closer inspection, they looked like strange insects with bent bodies. The spherical light rapidly rose, forming a gigantic arm that passed through the doors of flesh and blood. This arm, which clearly didn't belong to a human, pressed against the altar and forcefully squeezed out, causing the entire door of blood and flesh to shake. Even the forest and the entire island began to shake as though it was an earthquake. Verdun watched this scene happily, and his vision suddenly blurred. Pa! Something fell from his face into the bushes. Verdun subconsciously lowered his head and saw an eye with bulging blood vessels rolling around. Pa pa pa! His nose, ears, and remaining eye, as well as his muscles, plopped to the ground one after another, each seeping with a stellar radiance. Thump! His body collapsed as his flesh and blood completely collapsed. At that moment, the arm finally squeezed through the door of flesh and blood and attempted to pull out the rest of its body. Boom! In the darkness behind the door, thick lightning bolts formed a storm and descended, but they were swallowed by the sudden appearance of a blood-colored tide. Finally, a gigantic figure formed from pure spherical lights passed through the door of flesh and blood. In the next second, the spherical light began to collapse and fold, as though they were going to undergo a qualitative change. Following that, dark cracks appeared out of the void in the surrounding forest. These cracks directly engulfed the different parts of the trees, turning them into strange shapes. At the same time, a hurricane from unknown origins blew out from a crack and swept in all directions. The entire Blue Mountain Island that biome was on trembled as though it was about to sink. Inside the Cathedral of Waves, Alger Wilson, who was vexed over failing to monitor Verdun after he teleported, suddenly heard the sounds of doors opening. Every door in the city was opened automatically at this moment. Alger turned his head and looked into the forest outside the city that seemed to be the source of the anomaly. Thud! The moment the door opened, Derek, who had been woken up by the earthquake, frowned. Creak! 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 In the cities like Backlund, Trier, and St. Millum, all things that could be called doors opened. Above the gray fog, in the half-collapsed ancient palace, the crazy maggot vortex instinctively attacked the light gold figure and the fool symbol, but nothing came out of it. After nearly a minute, Genie suddenly chuckled. You really aren't him. Otherwise, I'd have distorted the promise you made just now and made his seal be removed automatically. This effect can only be achieved by twisting the original owner's words. You previously used this method to realize that I'm not the Lord of the Mysteries? Klein's voice sounded from the symbol of the fool. Genie scoffed and said, I have at least 10 ways to verify that it's him. Without waiting for Klein's reply, the pale gold figure smiled and said, You don't seem like you can maintain this state for too long. All right, the deal has been made. After I complete your 2 wishes, you must send the magic wishing lamp into the cosmos before 1368 of this epoch. Genie's voice gradually turned solemn, as if he was proclaiming a law. At that moment, he seemed to have established a particular rule based on this deal. There was no need to worry that Klein would go back on his word in the future. If you can't fulfill this promise, even if you become the Lord of the Mysteries, you will perish and split, warned the genie as he asked. Tell me your 2 wishes. Take note. Don't involve higher-level Beyonder characteristics, and don't exceed the limit of my present powers. Otherwise, the wish will be granted in a distorted way. This is a rule that has been set. I can't violate it now. In the symbol of the Fool that was outlined by the bright light, Klein's voice calmly said, "The first wish. The two wishes that Bernadette Gustave previously made are to be brought under my name. This should be very simple for you." Jeannie immediately said with a smile, "Indeed, you want to make use of the terrible outcome from making a third wish to deal with your current predicament. Not bad, this is something that stems from my level. I will satisfy your wish and let you die in pain." Klein's voice sounded again. "The second wish. Let my utopia give rise to a corresponding region in the spirit world. This doesn't involve the advancement of a sequence, nor does it have anything to do with higher level beyonder characteristics. You can definitely do it." Jeannie's light gold figure wavered before he said with a smile, "Your wish will be granted." Inside the corpse cathedral, Klein touched a bloody wooden stake on his chest, as though he was considering how to get it out. During this process, he casually asked Adam, "You didn't attempt to become a god in the fourth epoch because you didn't obtain 0-08? It was one factor. More importantly, there were still many latent dangers that haven't been resolved at that time." Adam looked at the huge cross in front of him, with a warm gaze. Klein turned his head to the side and looked at the visionary and said, "For example, during that period, the remnant will of the primordial one was still very strong." Before he finished his sentence, a large amount of bright red blood flowed down Klein's head. However, the corner of his lips curled up slightly.